Hello, everyone. I'm Ginny from Into English Podcast. Welcome to our new episode. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed this feeling? You achieve something you've been wanting for a while, maybe a goal, a milestone, or even something small. And for a moment, it feels good. You feel proud, maybe even relieved. But then, not long after that, your mind quietly moves on. What's next? What should I aim for now? Is this enough? And somehow, the thing that once felt so important no longer feels that special. If you pay attention, this doesn't just happen once. It happens again and again, in different areas of life. Money, career, relationships, self-improvement. There's always something else to chase. So in today's episode, we're going to explore a shift that sounds simple, but can completely change how you live your life. Stop chasing and start building. But before we talk about what that really means, we need to understand something deeper. Why do we always feel like we need something else?
There's a quiet pattern that many people don't notice. It's not about what you have, it's about how long it satisfies you. You get something you wanted, and for a short time, it feels enough. You feel like you've made progress, like you're finally moving forward. But that feeling doesn't last. Slowly, almost without you realizing it, your mind starts shifting again. It begins to look for the next target, the next improvement, the next version of your life. And this creates a strange experience. No matter how much you achieve, it never feels like a stable place to stand. It feels more like a moving line. As soon as you reach it, it moves further away. At first, you might think this is a good thing. It means you're ambitious. It means you're growing. It means you don't settle. And yes, there's some truth in that. But there's also another side that people don't talk about enough. If your mind is always focused on what's next, it becomes very difficult to feel satisfied with what is. You start living in a constant state of almost there, almost good enough, almost successful. And over time, this almost becomes your normal. Even when things are objectively fine, your internal experience still feels incomplete. What's happening here is not just about goals, it's about adaptation. Your brain gets used to what you have faster than you expect. What once felt exciting becomes normal. What once felt like progress becomes your baseline. And once something becomes normal, it stops giving you the same emotional reward. So your mind looks for the next thing, not because you truly need it, but because it wants to feel that sense of progress again. And that's where the cycle begins. You chase something, you get it, you adapt, and then you chase again. From the outside, it looks like growth. But from the inside, it can feel like restlessness, like you're always moving, but never really arriving. And here's the subtle problem. When you get used to this pattern, you start to believe that the answer is always somewhere in the future, that the next achievement, the next upgrade, the next version of yourself will finally make things feel complete. But if the pattern itself doesn't change, the feeling won't change either. So before we even talk about stopping this cycle, we need to understand why it feels so natural, why chasing something feels not only normal, but even necessary. And that's what we're going to explore next.
So now that we can recognize this pattern, the next question becomes more interesting. Why does it feel so natural? Why does chasing something feel like the default way to live? At a surface level, it looks like a personal choice, like you simply want more, so you go after more. But if you look deeper, it's not that simple. Your brain is wired to respond strongly to anticipation, not just the reward itself, but the feeling of getting closer to it. When you are working towards something, your mind creates a sense of momentum. You feel like you're progressing, like your future is improving, like something better is coming, and that feeling is powerful. Sometimes it's even more exciting than the reward itself. Think about it. Planning a trip can feel more exciting than the trip. Waiting for good news can feel more intense than receiving it. Working toward a goal can feel more meaningful than actually reaching it because anticipation creates energy. It gives your mind something to hold on to, and in a way, it gives you direction. But here's where it becomes tricky. That energy is temporary. Once you reach the goal, the anticipation disappears. And when it disappears, the emotional high goes with it. So your brain naturally starts looking for the next target to recreate that feeling. And this is how chasing becomes a cycle. Not because you consciously decide to keep chasing, but because your brain keeps looking for the next source of anticipation. There's also another layer to this. The world around you constantly reinforces this behavior. You see people achieving more, earning more, improving faster. You are exposed to highlights, milestones, visible success. And even if you don't compare yourself consciously, your mind still absorbs that information. It quietly asks, "Am I doing enough? Should I be further ahead?" So, chasing doesn't just come from inside you, it's also shaped by what you see around you. And over time, it starts to feel normal. It feels like standing still is dangerous, like not chasing something means you are falling behind. But here's the key insight. Chasing feels natural, not because it's always right, but because it keeps your mind stimulated. It gives you something to look forward to. It creates the feeling of movement, even when that movement is not always meaningful. And once you understand that, you can start to question it. Not every sense of progress is real progress, and not every exciting direction is the right one. Now let's look at the other side of this. Because chasing doesn't just give you energy, it also takes something away from you, quietly, over time. The first cost is subtle, but very important. You lose the ability to feel satisfied. Not because your life isn't good enough, but because your attention is always somewhere else. You are constantly leaning forward, mentally, thinking about what's next, what's missing, what could be better. And when your attention is always in the future, the present moment starts to feel incomplete. Even when things are objectively fine, even when you've made real progress, there's always a quiet voice saying, "This is not enough yet." The second cost is emotional instability. When your sense of worth is tied to what you achieve, your emotions start to rise and fall with your results. When things go well, you feel confident. When things slow down, you feel uncertain. And when things don't work out, you feel like something is wrong with you. So instead of having a stable sense of self, you become dependent on outcomes. And outcomes are never fully in your control. The third cost is exhaustion. Not always physical, but mental. Because chasing keeps you in a constant state of wanting. And wanting requires energy. It keeps your mind active, alert, slightly tense, always scanning for the next step, the next opportunity, the next improvement. Over time, that state becomes tiring, but many people don't recognize it because they are used to it. They think it's normal to feel this way, always pushing, always reaching, always thinking ahead. And maybe the most important cost is this. You start building a life that you don't actually experience. You are always preparing for the next phase, but rarely present in the current one. Always moving, but rarely arriving. And that's a strange place to be, because from the outside, everything might look like progress, but from the inside, it can feel like something is always missing. So this is the moment where things begin to shift. When you realize that chasing is not just a habit, it's a way of living. And if you don't question it, it will quietly shape your entire life. In the next part, we're going to look at a different perspective. Not about stopping ambition, but about changing the direction of your effort. At some point, if you pay enough attention, a question starts to appear. What if the problem is not how hard I'm trying, but what I'm focusing on? Because chasing and building can look very similar from the outside. Both involve effort, both require time,
Both can lead to results, but internally, they feel completely different. When you're chasing, your attention is always on the outcome. You think about what you will get, how it will feel, how it will change your life. Your motivation depends heavily on that future result. And because of that, your emotions become unstable. If progress is fast, you feel good. If progress is slow, you feel frustrated. If things don't work out, you feel stuck. Your energy rises and falls, depending on something you don't fully control. But when you're building, your attention shifts. You're no longer only focused on what you will get, you start focusing on what you are creating and who you are becoming in the process. The work itself becomes more important than the reward. And this creates a different kind of stability. Because even if results are slow, you are still building something, a skill, a habit, a way of thinking, a system that keeps working for you over time. So instead of asking, when will I get there, you start asking, am I doing the right thing consistently? That shift may sound small, but it changes how you experience effort. Chasing feels like pressure. Building feels like direction. Chasing pulls you forward with urgency. Building grounds you in something steady. And once you notice this difference, you can't unsee it. You start recognizing moments when you are driven by impatience versus moments when you are guided by intention. And that awareness becomes a turning point, because now you have a choice. Not whether to work hard or not, but what kind of effort you want to invest in.
So what does it really mean to start building? Because this idea can sound abstract if we don't make it clear. Building is not just about creating something big or impressive. It's not only about building a business or building wealth or building a career. It's much more fundamental than that. Building means you are creating something that continues to have value, even when your emotions change. For example, if you build a skill, it stays with you. If you build a habit, it supports you daily. If you build discipline, it helps you in situations where motivation disappears. These are things that don't depend on how you feel in a moment. They are stable. And that's what makes building powerful. Because chasing often depends on emotion. You feel motivated, so you act. You lose motivation, so you stop. But building is less emotional. It's more structured. You show up even when you don't feel like it. You repeat actions even when results are not visible yet. You focus on what compounds, not just what feels rewarding now. And here's an important point. Building is not always exciting. In fact, most of the time, it feels quite ordinary. You do the same things again and again. You don't get immediate feedback. You don't always feel progress. And that's exactly why many people avoid it. Because chasing feels alive. It has intensity, it has emotion, it has quick feedback. But building feels quiet, slow, sometimes even boring. Yet over time, it creates something much more meaningful. It creates a foundation, something that doesn't disappear when results fluctuate. So instead of living from one reward to the next, you start creating a system that produces results naturally. And that is the real shift, not from ambition to laziness, but from chasing outcomes to building something that makes those outcomes more likely to happen.
When people think about progress, they usually think about goals. Something clear, something measurable, something that feels important. I want to earn this amount. I want to reach this level. I want to achieve this milestone. And there's nothing wrong with that. Goals give you direction. They help you decide where to go. But here's where things become a problem. Many people don't just use goals as direction, they depend on them emotionally. They feel motivated only when they are close to the goal. They feel good only when they achieve something. And in between, they feel lost. That's why chasing and goal setting often go together. because both are focused on a future point. But building works differently. It shifts your attention away from the outcome and brings it back to what you do every day, your system. Your system is how you live, not what you aim for. It's the small actions you repeat, the habits you follow, the standards you keep even when no one is watching. And this is where real change happens. Because goals can inspire you, but they don't carry you. Systems do. Let's take a simple example. If your goal is to get fit, that sounds good. It gives you a direction. But what actually changes your body is your system. How often you exercise, what you eat, how you sleep, what you do on days when you don't feel motivated. That's where the result comes from. Or if your goal is to improve your career, the real question is not just what position you want, it's what skills you are building daily, how you approach your work, how you think, how you solve problems. That's your system. And systems have something very powerful. They don't rely on feeling. You don't need to feel motivated every day. You just need to follow the structure you've built. And over time, something shifts. You stop asking, "Am I there yet?" You start asking, "Am I showing up the right way today?" And that question is much more stable, because it brings your attention back to something you can control, not the future, but the present.
Now, if building is so effective, why do so many people still prefer chasing? The answer is simple. Because building feels slower. And not just slower, quieter. When you're chasing something, there's intensity, there's excitement, there's a sense of urgency. You feel like something big is happening. But when you're building, most days feel normal. You repeat the same actions. You don't see immediate results. Sometimes it even feels like nothing is changing. And that can be uncomfortable, because we are used to associating progress with visible outcomes. If we don't see results, we assume we're not moving. But that's not always true. Building works through accumulation. Small actions, repeated consistently, start to compound over time. At first, the change is almost invisible. Then slowly, it becomes noticeable. And eventually, it becomes significant. But this process requires something that chasing does not: patience. And more importantly, tolerance for delayed reward. You have to be willing to invest effort now without immediate feedback, to trust that what you are doing today will matter later. And that's not easy, because your brain prefers quick signals. It wants to know, is this working? It wants proof. But building doesn't always give you that proof right away. It asks you to continue anyway. And this is where most people stop. Not because they are incapable, but because they misinterpret the feeling. They think, this is not working, when in reality, it's just not working yet. So they go back to chasing. Back to something that feels faster, more exciting, more rewarding in the short term. But over time, that choice has a cost. Because chasing gives you spikes. Building gives you growth. One feels better now. The other works better over time. And if you can understand that difference and stay with the process just a little longer than most people, you start to see something change. Not suddenly, but steadily. And that kind of progress is much harder to lose. So at this point, the idea of building probably makes sense. But understanding something and actually doing it are very different things. Because chasing is not just a habit, it's a pattern that has been reinforced for a long time. So shifting away from it doesn't happen instantly. It starts with something very simple. You need to notice what you are currently chasing. Not in a judgmental way, just clearly. Is it a number, a title, approval from someone, a version of yourself that feels good enough. Once you see it, the next step is not to force yourself to stop caring. That usually doesn't work. Instead, you redirect your energy. You take that desire and turn it into something you can build. For example, if you're chasing recognition, maybe what you actually need to build is skill. If you're chasing money, maybe what you need to build is value, something that can generate that money over time. If you're chasing confidence, maybe what you need to build is evidence, small actions that prove to yourself that you can handle things. So the question changes, not how do I get this, but what do I need to build so that this becomes a natural result? That shift is subtle, but very powerful. Another important step is to make things smaller. Chasing often focuses on big outcomes. Building focuses on small, repeatable actions. Instead of trying to change everything at once, you choose one direction and you make it part of your daily life. It could be something very simple, reading a few pages, practicing a skill, writing a little, improving one part of your work. It doesn't feel impressive, but that's the point. Building is not about intensity, it's about consistency. And consistency becomes easier when the action is small enough to repeat. There's also something you need to protect, your attention, because chasing feeds on distraction. The more you look at what others are doing, the more your mind starts to shift away from your own path. So if you want to build something meaningful, you need to reduce that noise. Not completely, but enough to stay focused on your own process. And finally, you need to change how you measure progress. Instead of asking, did I achieve something big today? You ask, did I show up and do what I said I would do? That question may feel simple, but over time, it builds something much stronger than motivation. It builds trust in yourself. And once you trust yourself, you don't need to chase as much anymore. At the end of all of this, what really changes is not just your actions, it's your definition of success. When you are in a chasing mindset, success is always something ahead of you, something you don't have yet. And because of that, it always feels slightly out of reach. But when you start building, success becomes something different. It's no longer just about what you achieve. It's about what you are capable of creating. It's about the kind of person you are becoming. Someone who can learn, someone who can adapt, someone who can create value again and again. And that kind of success is more stable because it doesn't disappear when one result goes wrong. It doesn't depend on one opportunity. It stays with you. So instead of living from one reward to the next, you start living from a place of capability. You don't need every moment to feel exciting. You don't need constant validation because you know quietly that you are building something real. And over time, something shifts. You still have goals. You still move forward, but you are no longer chasing your life. You are shaping it. So maybe today, instead of asking what you should chase next, you pause for a moment and ask a different question. What am I building right now? And is it something that will still matter a year from now? You don't have to change everything at once. Just start with one thing, one habit, one skill, one direction, and give it time. Because the most meaningful progress is often the one that feels the least dramatic at the beginning. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.